Good morning, good day, colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this Tech Learn talk today. My name is Johanna. I'm from the UN Innovation Network. And as you can see on the slide, this series of Tech Learn talks is run in collaboration with colleagues from ITU and the UN Office of ICT. And I'm actually really curious to see how many colleagues in the room have joined us previously for a session on Tech Learn talks. So as we're still all fresh and joining and paying attention, I'm launching a quick poll. Tell us, have you joined any of these sessions before? Do you know what they're about? Very curious to see what kind of a response we're getting. Leaving it open for a few more seconds to hit the magic 70% response rate. Okay, here we go, sharing the results back with you. So for a lot of colleagues, this is the first time you're joining. Welcome, it's fantastic to have you here. But I see also a few of you have joined many or more, about half have joined many or several. That's a great sign. Thanks for coming back. Speaks to the fact that we might be putting on good content for you, which is exciting for us. And with that, for the colleagues who have never joined before, and for everyone who might need a refresher, I'd actually like to briefly hand over to my colleague Ursula from the ITU. She's the representative of the ITU in New York and leads the series together with me. Ursula, do you want to give a little bit of background about the Tech Learn talks and the idea behind them?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Johanna. So including for perhaps as a reminder for those maybe who haven't joined one recently, the purpose of this webinar series is to help colleagues from across the UN understand new and emerging technologies and innovation a bit better. As we all know, and COVID of course has accelerated this, the world is changing so rapidly, including as regards new technologies, and the pace of digital transformation is just speeding up. And so, among other things, we wanted to create this series, including for ourselves, to help demystify these technologies and also to showcase how our colleagues across the UN are using these technologies to advance their mandates. So one of the biggest advocates in the UN, as many of you may know, for innovation and digital technologies and leveraging ICTs for the SDGs and for capacity building is the UN Secretary General himself. And he's repeatedly stressed that innovation is a priority for him, and he's spearheaded initiatives, developed strategies and policy guidance, some of which is captured here on the slide and may be familiar to you. For example, his strategy on new technologies, the report from his digital financing task force, his roadmap for digital cooperation, the guide to blockchain, and the UN data strategy, among others. And he's also been a champion of the UN Innovation Network's Innovation Toolkit. And he's expressed his expectation that everyone in the UN system will take steps to boost their own digital skills so that we can all serve the world better and help the UN system to achieve its mandates. We're urged to think creatively, leverage technology and data sources in the work that we do every day. So if we just move briefly to the next slide, as a contribution to this goal, this Tech Learn Talk series seeks to raise awareness about these new and emerging technologies and how they're being used in the UN in a way that is jargon-free and that doesn't assume prior knowledge about the technology concerned. We hope to have create a safe and comfortable space for learning and to raise interest in learning more. So no question is too big or small or silly, etc. And previous sessions have looked at blockchain, AI, chatbots, drones. You can see there in the graphic the ones that we've done previously. And the recording and slides for all of these is on the UN Innovation Network website, so that you can catch up on those, and a number of you hadn't, this is your first one. We actually wanted to, are we going to, Johanna, ask people another poll question about if they've had prior exposure to robotic process automation?
Absolutely, let's do that straight away.
Yes, great.
So robotic process automation, theme for the day. Tell us if you know what it is, or if a refresher or an introduction entirely may be needed. I awkwardly always wait until we hit 70% responses, which is happening now, 70%. So sharing back, here are your results, Ursula.
Perfect, yes, I see. So around 30% have not heard of it before, and about 38% have a vague idea, and 26% have heard of it. So one of the reasons why we're so excited about this webinar is it does seem to have so much potential for, across the UN and all entities. So we're really excited to have the program today. We also just wanted to share, if we could dismiss those results and just go to the next slide, just a reminder, at the next slide, I think we already mentioned that. Thank you. Oh, I'm just going to tell you then. Just a reminder that we have the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. So please do put your questions in there. And for those who haven't joined these sessions before, we have 2 Q&A sessions. So there'll be one after the keynote introduction, which will be by Manuel. And then there'll be another Q&A after we have the case study from Carla and Kamal. So you'll have 2 lots of chances to ask questions. And if you have experiences yourself with RPA, feel free, if you want to post in the chat and share, for instance, any links. You can also vote up a question. If a colleague has asked a question and you really agree, please feel free to do that. And if we run short of time, that will help us guide which questions to ask. So with that, I'll hand the floor back to Johanna, who's also going to introduce our fantastic speakers, to whom we're incredibly grateful from UNICC and ESCWA. Thanks.
Thank you, Ursula, and thank you for being such a wonderful partner in crime and bringing the series on. I can't believe it's been over a year that we've been doing this TechLearn Talks. So not much left to say from my side, except indeed, of course, thank you to our speakers for the day. As you can see, we have Manuel Nunes. He's from the ICC, the UN's International Computing Center, where he's a senior business analyst, and he's going to do this introduction to RPA in a jargon-free way. So good challenge for you, Manuel. And then after that, we're going to colleagues from ESCWA, and that, of course, is the UN's Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. And there we have Carla Ziadeh, Administrative Officer, and Kamal Al-Khatib. He's the coordinator of the Finance Innovation Group, and they're going to share with us how ESCWA is using RPA in their work already. But first of all, Manuel, heading over to you. Do you want to turn your video on and take the floor? Good morning. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you so much, Johanna and Ursula, for the introduction. So maybe the first real thing to say is what do we actually do within the UNICC hyperautomation practice, and what does it mean to be a senior business analyst, right? So a really big chunk of what we do is very much connected with the topic that we are here today. So creating awareness around the topic of robotic process automation, right? And although, as you said, Johanna, doing it with a jargon-free, it's always a challenge. I'll do my best to make sure to avoid using technical terms. But if one of or another slips, yeah, feel free also to challenge me then on the Q&A, and I'll try to go a bit deeper. Really, from an agenda point of view today, we wanted to touch a couple of things. So really the first thing is to demystify what do we actually mean by robotic process automation, specifically targeting this word of robot, right? So every time that we actually see this word describing like a technology field, our minds immediately pushes to physical robots, industrial robots in a factory. And we'll actually try to learn today that although the word robotic is there in the name, it's actually, the concept is quite different from physical robots, right? We'll then hope to go a little bit deeper in the sense of understanding the layer below. So now that we know that process automation is possible to do with these new type of softwares, what sorts of automations and types do actually exist that we can apply in our day-to-day lives, right? So you already see here point number 3, attended and unattended. So those are also big names. Point number 4 will be a little bit discussing, okay, how do you get started? And I think in the direction of jargon, platform, and architecture, they are pretty big IT terms, but really what we're trying to demystify is which components actually altogether make a solution of robotic process automation, and which of these separate components do I actually need to have in my organization in order for me to achieve some sort of automation of processes. And then we'll stop before the Q&A with a little bit of a tangible section where we try to say, okay, where do we actually see these RPA projects being taking place within the UN ecosystem, and what sort of processes are actually good candidates for us to automate with these technologies, right? So without further ado, let's really deep dive, right? So as I was saying, the word robotic process automation has nothing to do with physical robots, right? So at the end of the day, we see these technologies as digital software that basically is installed in a computer and is trained to do a business process in an automated way, meaning without a business user actually performing the steps, right? And perhaps the best metaphor that I've encountered over the years to really kind of, entail the concept of RPA is one of those pianos that we see in shopping malls that is actually playing itself without a pianist, right? Without a musician actually playing the music, right? And so what we do in our practice at UNICC is apply the same context, the same concept for business processes, right? So we have a computer that plays itself as a mouse clicking without having a human clicking on the mouse, and also as the keyboard performing actions on a process without having a person typing on that keyboard, right? And so this is really the first thing that we were trying to demystify, is that the word robot in a way should be out of the name, right? And the second thing is really connected with, okay, if we are looking for processes to automate, what exactly are the characteristics of these processes that make them good candidates or not for automation, right? And here on the right side, we see a lot of characteristics that are good kind of indicators that you might have a shot at implementing robotic process automation. So we look for highly repetitive processes, stuff like processing invoices. Processes need to be rules-based, meaning that from an intelligence point of view, RPA is still not very advanced, right? So we are able to mimic rules that we basically can lay out, but if we have decision points within our processes that require human judgment, it might not be the best candidate for RPA. We look for also like low exception rates, so typically processes that are very transactional but don't have a lot of scenarios. Why? Because it makes the implementation very fast and the benefit also very high, right? And ultimately, it allows us to extract some of those very labor-intense processes that as humans, we don't like to do them anyway. So for example, swiveling my chair between one system and passing data for another system. And we basically take those processes and automate them, right? So I won't go into much detail in all the factors, but of course, one of the other things also to mention is that RPA takes care of digital data. I would say 99% of the times. So there's still a lot of limitations in automating processes that have, for example, a lot of paper involved, that have a lot of handwriting notes. So those are some of the typical limitations that we have. Now, on a very high level, what sort of automations do we actually have when we look at business processes, right? Business processes are not all created alike, right? We have business processes that are very back office, right? So they are very repetitive, very transactional. And typically here, the best type of automation that we have is called unattended automation, which on a very high level can be described as an automation that can be scheduled and does not require the human input in order to start, right? So a case in point, very practical, can be, for example, your record to report processes that if any of you works in a shared service center, you know that you have to do them every month, right? So we can actually plan a schedule ahead of time and have the robots, follow a particular fiscal cadency, and let's say every second day of the month, the robot would immediately trigger, start the process, and then just pass the results to a human team that then analyzes them and makes business conclusions, right? At the same time, we have other processes that require basically human trigger. They are performed, let's say, ad hoc. They might be performed in real time when the interaction with the client is ongoing. And for these, typically we use attended automation. Right. So one of the cases in point here that is very common is, for example, we have customer services department or team within our organization that's in the middle of being on the phone with another agency. They need to trigger a robot to perform some work. For example, download some data and bring me the data in real time, right? And so for these, because they are quite hard to schedule and they also have a lot of human dependencies and over points, we tend to use attended automation. One of the last categories, or the last category that is becoming also more and more common, is the concept of citizen development. So what we've seen over the past 2 years is that the technologies are becoming easier to implement. And a lot of processes are actually composed of tiny tasks that the users themselves, because the technologies are getting easier, could automate these basically processes in a decentralized way without actually having to have a robotic process automation formal project to foster automation within our agencies, right? And so the concept of citizen development is essentially empowering our employees, our business users, with tools to allow them to directly automate their tasks, right? So there's a little bit of a couple of nuances here that I'm happy to take forward in the Q&A. So typically, if a process is very complex, it might not be a good candidate for citizen development. But here, the very good news is that the technologies that we use to build automation processes are trending in the way to become easier and easier to build. Now, very briefly, just like looking at the benefits that we can actually, expect from robotic process automation. We have obviously compliance, which is a big one in our field here. So all of these technologies actually come from a banking background. So there's a lot of controls and checks that ensure that a formal audit trail and the segregation of roles and responsibilities can be achieved. Robots typically foster productivity and reliability, both for our employees who are freed from tasks that they don't like and can now spend tasks the time performing other tasks that were in backlog and we never did them because we didn't have time. And at the same time, we have the extra capabilities and capacity from the robots who can work in theory 24/7, right? So we can schedule the robots at night, we can have our robots processing invoices during the weekend, right? Now, a couple of things that are very important, so point consistency and accuracy, is that whatever we code or whatever we implement within these technologies, it stays there, right? So the bots basically are not intelligence in the sense that the processes will change on the fly. No, we really get the same consistency when we are performing the tasks because the bot does the same task every time. Right, so we are able to predict if I have to process 10 invoices today, each invoice will take 10 minutes, I will take 20 minutes only. And then it's very accurate as well because essentially the robot is not making mistakes unless it is coded wrongly. Last, already 2 points I already mentioned. So one is the technology barrier is very low. So me, myself, I used to be an RPA developer and I was never technical in my background. So after a couple of months, it was quite easy to actually start modeling the processes with the technologies. And then we see, and hopefully Esko can also talk to this point a bit later, also the morale of the organizations where people are part of automation processes and are actually actively building these bots. So the bots then can work for people and make jobs essentially better, right? So in essence, we are taking the robot out of the employee, right? On a very high level, just a couple of also tasks that that we typically see. So anything that is filling forms, passing data from one system to the other, logging in our systems and performing downloads. These are all tasks that are quite suitable for automation with robotic process automation. And the rule of thumb is always, if it's possible to map from a rules-based, so it doesn't require human judgment, then most likely it is possible to be automated with the robotic process automation, irrespective of the underlying system, right? So one of the things I didn't mention at the very start is that RPA operates on the user interface of our applications. That means that we teach the bot to click on the same buttons, write on the same fields that we as human users on our applications do, right? Now, very briefly, to go a bit deeper on the concept of attended and unattended, right? So we have here like an illustrative process. So for us to start shaping a little bit and get an idea of where an attended automation would work, right? So as we mentioned, these processes require that the user and our staff is actually triggering the process. So here we have a little bit of kind of an illustrative example of an order creation, right? So the employee basically like prepares the data up front for the task. The bot is triggered, and the bot is doing what is called a load queue. So the bot is preparing all the data, doing all the downloads from different applications. And while the bot is doing this, the bot is also filtering out cases that should not be processed. The bot then asks for a validation for the human to check the results. If approved, the bot starts to perform the process. So making an offer, placing an order, etc. If there's an exception, exceptions are escalated for human to be verified manually. If there's no exception, the process stopped, right? Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have unattended automation, which basically means that the process, so read an email, open an Excel, and basically write the information, can actually be, if there's no exceptions, all the way until the end without any human intervention, right? So that's just a visual, basically kind of diagram to basically try to distinguish a little bit the differences. And now, conscious that I'm also running a little bit out of time to give time for Q&A, just a little bit of a snapshot of what sort of organizations within our world are working with, right? So really the key message that we want to give from ICC is that this is really cross kind of, let's say, mandate and also cross function, right? It can be applied in most various processes across different organizations, provided that the processes themselves follow the rules that we described before. And then just to give you also a little bit of a high-level snapshot on which areas typically are good candidates for us to start looking at this type of processes. So administration and travel, it's quite a big one in our world here, right? So there's a lot of manual tasks that require that we are creating travel requests, managing it, travel advances, following up on them. So we've done a lot of that. There's also a lot in the area of finance. So anything connected with reconciliations, processing of invoices, creation of purchase orders, typically good candidates. And then obviously skipping a few on the procurement side of things. So a lot of requisition for funds, vendor screenings, and all of these tasks within the macro processes, they typically are very good candidates for us to automate. So I hope I did well with the jargon, but please feel free also now to raise questions, and I'm happy to go a bit deeper if needed.
Thank you, Manu. That was great. Really, really great introduction. And indeed, let's take a few questions here. I have some coming in, and just to say to colleagues that after we've grilled Manu, we're moving to the case study, and then we're also going to show you a little bit of a video of what an RPA looks like in practice. So just a reminder, we are taking any questions you may have in the Q&A box. Please put them in there, and please make it easy for us by voting on questions that you find interesting. And I'm starting with, I love the basic questions always, Manu. Here's one. How long does it take to build a basic RPA? Say if you're trying to optimize 10 steps, how long would it take you to do?
Right, so the average small process from an RPA perspective, we can do it up to 3 weeks, right? And so this means that we go from defining the process, so sitting with the business user and understanding the steps, all the way until we have a process ready to start running live.
Okay, so 3 weeks, not long, especially if it takes a lot of hours.
Exactly.
I usually like to give the floor to colleagues to ask questions themselves. I hope they're okay with me just picking a few on here. What, Marco from ICAO, what tools are you using to interact with the bot, to program the bot, to follow on the work, etc.?
Yeah, so the three big tools in the RPA market that we work with are UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism, right? So those are the three big kind of softwares within the field. More recently, also Microsoft has entered the space. So when Microsoft enters, it means that the space is also growing. But the three ones, they remain kind of the big softwares, and we work with all of them within our UNICC practice.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Because I had a specific request for to ask the question themselves, I'm giving the floor to Ankush from DPPA or DPO, I believe. And apparently, I've just clicked your way. Stay with me, Ankush. I'll have to talk. You should be able to take the floor now.
Yeah. Hi, Johanna. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Oh, great. So in fact, I typed my question below, but my question is that I'm still a little foggy about RPA, and you mentioned that we're going to talk about it more. But just to begin with and to clarify my mind, a chatbot that turns up when we approach any customer care, is it an example of an unattended RPA? Is it a very basic one, or and the more complex ones are more complex than that?
Yeah, so the way we typically see chatbots and RPA is complementary. So I wouldn't say that they are necessarily the same, right? In fact, within the way that we structure the practice, there's developers that do chatbot projects and there's developers that do RPA projects. But there's many processes that require, in order to be automated, a complementary of the two tools, right? So the example that you just mentioned of having like a process that is actually triggered by a customer on a website, we would not be able to trigger that process with RPA. So typically what happens is that we build a chatbot to structure the input, and then there's an RPA bot that takes the request in the background, so not visible to the external client, right? In the end, there's a concept that very recently Gartner put out that is called hyperautomation, which is essentially the ecosystem of all of these process automation technologies that work together to automate processes, right? So in the end, if you do a process automation project, it's very likely that you come across RPA and chatbots being used interchangeably, but I wouldn't say they are necessarily the same.
Thank you very much, and I hope, Ankush, that answered your question. They're flying in, Manu, so brace yourself. We're going to continue this journey. Can you provide some real-life examples of the citizen development process, please?
Right. So right now within UNICC, we are doing a project with IFET, where essentially we are basically running it in multiple phases. The first phase is basically creating a little community, right? So it is always important, and one of the things that we always stress is when you do a citizen development program, it's not just installing the software on the user's computer and suddenly automation starts to actually happen, right? So you need to basically create a community so people support each other. You need to give training, and once that's in place, you actually start to automate processes. If the question is actually regarded to particular basically processes that we automated, one of the things with citizen developers is that you might not even call them processes. They are task automations, right? So let's say within a business process, you always need every Tuesday to download the same PDF from 3 web portals, right? So this can barely be classified as a process. But it's definitely creating workload for the user themselves, right? And so this is a sample task that we typically automate with citizen development.
Thank you very much, Manu. 2 related questions. Warren from Khaled, he's wondering, is there a threshold in terms of volume to consider processes for RPA? And I'm going to piggyback Marco again on there, saying, is it fair to say that whenever a human copies data from one place to another, is there room for RPA there?
Yeah, so starting with the last question first, it is fair, right? So in the ideal world, there would not be the need to copy data from one application to the other, right? The applications would sync. Traditionally, because there was a gap between applications, we filled basically the gap with human users, right? Now we can fill the gap with RPA, right? So I would say so. If we are copying data from one source to the other, most likely it's a repetitive task that we could automate. With regards to the first question, Joanna, could you give me a hint there? Just.
Of course. So what is the threshold of volume? Is it the task has to be done, you know, a certain amount of times per day, week? When does it start to make sense to develop an RPA?
Right. So this is also part of the practice that where I work within UNICC. So we always try to, especially for the unattended cases, to make a business case for the process, right? So of course automation is a trend and so on, but automating a process just because of automating, and then it turns out that there's no volumes to actually justify putting the work, typically it's not the best way to do it. So each case is a case, but we do take the volumes in consideration. And it can even be that you get to a point where the volumes are too high to do it with RPA, that even there's other tools that's, you know, that are better to treat kind of big data, right? Definitely you should look for processes that are done regularly and that have a lot of volume in the sense of, you know, 300 cases a week, stuff like that.
Thank you, Manu. Here I was hoping that I could automate some processes in my work, but I don't think they're high volume enough. There are lots more great questions coming in, but I would actually like to take a moment now and go to our case study and then come back to some of the questions in here. So Manu, I'm going to say thank you for this rapid introduction to RPA. It's been great. Please come back later for the second Q&A as well in case colleagues have more questions. And now I am very happy to welcome you, Carla, to the floor. We're going to share your screen, and then you and Kamal are going to share with us how Esqua is using RPA already. So we can see the screen if you put it on full screen. Usually bottom right corner, I think.
Hi, good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to share the screen, and I think I'm able to share it, but not sure if you can see it.
That's better. That's perfect.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Excellent.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you, Ursula, for organizing this webinar. And good morning, good afternoon, colleagues around the globe. We're happy to be here today to present our experience from Esqua's side in the RPAs. I would like to start by giving you a bit of background on how it all started at Esqua. We were actually trying to assess our internal processes in an effort to streamline some of our operational activities. And we had in the back of our mind, of course, our vision, which is to position Esqua as a center of excellence for service delivery. And with that, we needed to achieve efficiencies within our processes, because if you want to position yourself as a service provider, you would need to have efficient processes in parallel. So that's how it started. That's why we're also saying that this strengthened collaboration and cooperation with our UN Secretariat counterparts in alignment with the efficiency agenda of the Secretary General reform, because also this would achieve efficiency as part of the efficiency agenda and further consolidation of many processes. So that's the background. I'm gonna move now to give you an idea about Esqua's approach and how we moved forward with the RPA. So as we assessed our current processes, we were trying to identify candidates, basically to be restructured. we found that the travel on behalf process, so it's called travel on behalf process, which is a process that is mainly created in our ERP system, Umoja, and the UN Secretariat. This process included a number of manual and repetitive steps. The travel on behalf process is practically the creation of travel requests to allow meeting participants and representatives to travel and attend meetings organized and funded by ESCWA. This would require our admin colleagues to go into the ERP system. And for example, if we're having a meeting of 50 participants, our admin colleague would have to go in and create 50 travel requests for the 50 participants and go through all the repetitive and redundant steps. We found that this process is basically a good candidate to be streamlined, and this is where all the work actually started. We tried to search for a solution and explored all the possible options. Also, of course, I would like to pinpoint that ESCWA was trying with this particular process to tackle and focus on the redundancies and the repetitive steps, as Manuel also presented previously. And the solution to redundancy is almost always automation. This led ESCWA to further also consolidate the available automation options, and this is why we connected with UNICC colleagues and we presented a business case, and we worked together with them to develop or to find out the appropriate solution. And with our discussions with UNICC, we found out that the perfect solution would be the RPAs. As earlier presented also by UNICC, RPAs mimic exactly the human actions and interact with applications and would result in the same outputs as, for example, the admin colleague who would be creating those travel requests. Before we stepped into the project, we conducted a cost-benefit analysis, and we concluded that the adoption of the RPA in this particular complex process of travel on behalf will result in various efficiencies. That's why we moved forward with our project, and we worked with UNICC. And I can tell you the key benefits to adopting the RPA. First, it boosts the efficiency and redundancy, since we are eliminating all of these repetitive steps. So definitely, you would basically, our staff would not engage in all of these repetitive steps, and this would result in efficiencies in our processes. It also improves accuracy and speeds the service while decreasing human error. So when you automate, so instead of having our admin staff process 50 travel requests, this is a tedious job that consumes time. And also, I would like to share with you that here in Lebanon, the internet is very slow. So our ERP sometimes is freezing, sometimes it's giving us a bit of delays. So with the RPA program, the staff or the admin staff wouldn't have to worry about all of these inconveniences. In this case, this process also would improve the accuracy because it would eliminate human error as well. Lastly, would be training and launching. The RPA is user-friendly, and they work on existing IT infrastructure, as also mentioned by my colleague from UNICC. The staff just need to be trained on how to operate and start and function the RPA. So it's not like a robust training that they have to go through. So it's a user-friendly, basically, type of application. Without any further delay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kamal to go over a couple of slides which are more technical. My colleague Kamal, he is the coordinator for the finance innovation team at ESCWA, and he was leading on this project. So Kamal, over to you. Kamal will also walk you through his slides, but as well will share with you a video on and the presentation on how actually the robot works. Kamal, over to you.
Okay.
So while you're fixing the echo, Kamal,
1 second, let me put on my cam.
Come back on video. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some of the colleagues. Okay, so the idea, as my colleague Carla was saying, after many meetings and brainstorming with the ICC, was to come up with an RPA pilot for ESCWA that had many repetitive steps. It was a create travel request on behalf of ESCWA. We are one of the biggest organizers of meetings in the region. So our aim was to streamline this process while the admin assistant would focus on more strategic work. Each travel request would consume more than 15 minutes, if not more, due to our internet, and like around 64 steps to create one travel request. And this process goes through workflow in our ERP, which is Umoja, SAP. So it has 3 steps. The creation of the travel request, that at that time, our pilot project was Adam. So it was not Adam 1. So we created Adam to create the travel request on behalf of, so that the admin assistant would have a more streamlined process and have time to concentrate on more high-level functions, like coordinating with high-level representatives, ministers, etc. So Adam, the idea of Adam 1 was born. So since it's our pilot RPA, we called it Adam. Our HR colleagues now, they have Eva, so we are gender sensitive in this regard. So for Adam 1, it creates a travel request. Then through the workflow, it pushes it for certification. Colleagues who are in the secretariat would know that this is known as the TSA, okay? The certifying officers, they have to certify the second step of the workflow. And the third one, we agreed with our colleagues in ICC to finish the 3 steps, Adam 1, Adam 2, and Adam 3 is the actual approval. The TPO is the travel processing office. It's basically the travel unit. They have to close this process by approving the travel request. So creation, certification, and approval. So Adam 1 was, the idea was born towards the end of 2019. Okay, and we went live beginning of March 2020. Unfortunately, at the same time of the outbreak of the pandemic. But we were able to run Adam 1 for a couple of meetings, and it was very successful. Okay, so after that, you know, travel restrictions, etc. But we are picking up on this with the ease of the pandemic. Adam 2, we are now at the final stage, and I think that by Friday, we will finish our user approval testing. And we did some tweaks to Adam 1. We even enhanced Adam 1 to read with Adam 2. They communicate now, our bots. So basically, Adam 2 would know who was certifying for the travel request executed by Adam 1. Okay, so basically for the execution, we opted for the attended. Why? Because we are using a template for the bot to execute. This template, we need the staff member to be accountable of the template that the bot is reading from. As our colleague Manuel was saying, it is not actually, you know, like a robotic in the sense of physical robot that can do and think, etc. No, we need to feed it. So we need to have the staff accountable for their actions. And at the end of the day, they are entering their credentials, their SAP user ID and password. Adam 2, it's the same. We have the certifying officer also launching the UiPath to run the bot. They have to enter their credentials, and you can specify as many email addresses to have the notification of the status report at the end of the execution. Okay, can we move to the next slide? Okay, so workflow, it starts. Now you see when we launch our video demo. the user would have to open the UiPath, okay, to start the bot execution. So as we said, Adam1 would we would have the admin assistant pick the template for the bot, and then they will the admin assistant will have to log in their credentials, and it is not stored in anywhere, so for confidentiality. So the user will input their user ID and the password, and then there is a pop-up window. You can specify as many emails for the people you want them to be notified of the status report after the execution of the bot. And then, as you see, the steps for the people who are familiar with SAP is the usual steps in Umoja, but of course summarized. The bot would launch in the portal. If the employee had a travel request, there is a certain workflow. If not, it will add the employee and then start the creation of the travel request, and then also attach the input file to the travel request. Why? Because this file we needed for Adam2 to make the connection with the Adam1 for the certification part. Okay, and then our template is by column. Each meeting participant has a column. So the bot will read them column after column. If it fails for any reason, and we will get the reason with the snapshots where it failed, okay, at the end of the day, you will have how many successful, how many unsuccessful, and why, and with the screenshots. Okay, so when it finishes one meeting participant, it moves to the next, and so on and so forth, until it finishes all the meeting participants, which are the people who are for whom we are creating the travel request on their behalf. Okay, so the bot basically quickly, it will have 3 attempts for any failed transaction, and then it will go to the status report and it will tell you why it failed. Now I think we can move to the live demo.
Yes, Kamal, we're going to move to the live demo immediately. I'm going to start sharing my screen.
Okay, so basically, sorry, okay. So basically here, the user launched the UiPath, they entered their credentials, okay, and then the bot is now launching the ERP by itself. Okay, it goes to the Travel Administrator tab. Now it's all the bot, okay, we sped the video, it's all the bot doing all the actions. As Manuel was explaining, it's basically, I can sum it up with, it's all about clicking, basically. So just to give you a quick idea on the difference, so one meeting participant in the portal would maybe take 15 minutes, versus in the template maybe 3 minutes. And we will have a workstation for the bot, so that the user can launch it and go do their other strategic work. We have designed a workstation for the bots, so it will be like in a different environment and running by itself. So here it's entering the cost assignment that will be charged. Okay, so this is like a training environment. So all these data, it's not, it's only for training purpose, the index numbers and the names. So now, it reviews and sends. Okay, so basically now the Adam1 pushed this travel request to the certifying officer for Adam2. Adam2, as I said, we're at the final stages. Hopefully by next week, we will go live as well.
Thank you, Kamal, for the slides and for the presentation. Let me just open my video. We still have the sample output. If you would like to cover it, please. This is the sample output that comes as a result of the RPA. So can you please go over it? Thank you.
Okay, so basically, the bot Adam1 or Adam2, etc., would send an email to the user that launched the bot. And there is a pop-up window, as I said, when the user is launching, executing the bot, you can add as many people, recipients, to receive this exact same email. It will tell you in total 2 transactions were processed, 2 were successful, 0 transactions were not successful. And whenever there's a transaction that is not successful, it will send a separate email with the exception, snapshot where it stopped, etc., and the full description of the error. Again, as I said, it will attempt 3 times because sometimes it may be a connection error, a Citrix. Here I would like to mention that robotics with Citrix is not very friendly, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank ICC. They really suffered. It's not an easy environment to work RPA from, but we managed for Adam1 and Adam2 with the special thanks to Jaume Ross from ICC and all the colleagues. So it would attempt like 3 times. If not, we will know why. And we also made sure that whenever sometimes it may reach the stage of saving as draft, it would give it a number. We made sure that the bot would not try again, so not to have a Trave request number forgotten. So we made sure that whatever is drafted, the admin assistant would have to pick it up manually, and they are very, 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 very few cases.
Thank you, Kamal. I'm going to move quickly to the last 2 slides, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go over them real quickly. So we're going to talk here about the results. And the first result is the redirection of Espoir staff efforts to value-adding tasks. And here I'm going to quote Manuel when he said, so it's basically taking the robot out of the employee. So this is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to eliminate these repetitive steps and cumbersome process and take out these functions from our admin staff so that they can do more interesting and probably analytical work and take over more important functions, which at the end of the day would boost their morale. Then there's an enhanced Espoir capacity, and this is extremely important because you wouldn't worry about expanding capacity and then shrinking back, because if you have 5 meetings, or if you have 10 meetings or 15 meetings, when it comes to the processing of these travel requests from Adam1 to Adam2 and Adam3, you don't have to actually worry about it because the robot, the RPA, would be taking over all of these steps. And then you wouldn't need to worry about hiring extra capacity. At Espoir, when we have meetings, we actually hire sometimes additional meeting assistants to particularly support during big events and meetings. So with this RPA, we feel that our staff, our admin staff, would be relieved from these redundant steps and tasks. Then the last...
apologies,
yes.
We're rapidly running out of time. Can I give you
Yes.
20 more seconds to wrap up, and then
Yes,
I really want to go to Q&A. Thank you.
Yes, of course. The last one is the full-time equivalent, and here I would like to share with you quickly that Espoir managed to save 300 hours work based on statistics, historical statistics and data from previous meetings. So this was in our business case. Moving to the last slide, which is success factors. I did not put it here, but it goes without saying that you definitely need buy-in from senior management. Here for Espoir, we have all the support from senior management on innovation. So one of the other success factor is continuous communication with staff, especially admin staff. We even have an admin colleague and more than one engaged in working with the FIT, the Finance Innovation team, working with Kamal directly on the development of the RPA. So continuous communication and a participatory approach. So with this, I conclude, and over to you, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Wonderful presentation. I'm sorry to rush you, and I'm happy to pass on compliments from our colleagues who are really liking the demo and the work and who have a ton of questions. So at this stage, very happy to invite everyone back to the floor. So Kamal, Manu, if you want to come back on video, please do so, and maybe we can stop the screen sharing to allow colleagues to actually see them. So maybe doing a rapid fire question round, really quick, concise answers. How long did it take to implement the system, Carla? Can you add on new processes, and did it cost what you expected it to cost? Is a question from Henrietta.
Yes, I'm gonna transfer this question to Kamal, who can provide more details on the timelines and the cost as well. Kamal.
Yes, hi. Okay, so basically the cost was really very affordable. There is a development cost upon signing the agreement, and then there is the monthly recurring cost for maintenance support, and really our colleagues at ICC, they went even beyond. So it's very affordable. I will not disclose, I will leave it up to ICC for the interested colleagues who want to launch their RPA systems. Now for us, how long it took, I would like to mention that at the time, we had our the beginning of the economic crisis in Lebanon towards the end of 2019, and demonstrations and roadblocks and burning of tires, and really it was like very hectic, but we managed to, I cannot give you the realistic time, because in Lebanon we are suffering from crisis to crisis. And with the Adam 2 also, we had the Beirut blast, and our building was destroyed, and then again the power shortage, the internet interruptions. So I would leave this to the RPA, and I probably concur with Manuel. He gave like an estimate of maybe 3 weeks. But for us in Lebanon, with the internet, the power shortage, the roadblocks, etc., it was really a very successful cooperation with ICC. But maybe I would forward this to Manuel, maybe.
Manuel, for a super quick answer, please.
Yeah, just to add there, I think the fact that we had to develop also with the Citrix made the timelines a little bit longer. But if I recall correctly, the first process was around 8 weeks, right? The Adam 1, if I recall correctly. And if we could bypass Citrix, would have been much faster.
Great. Thank you. For any cost estimates, please feel free to contact Manuel directly. We'll be sharing contact details. I really want to take a couple more questions, so apologies for really pushing for speed here. But the most liked question is, what is the biggest barrier for implementing more RPAs across UN entities? Who are the most common gatekeepers? So maybe quick reflections from Esquire. What was most difficult to do? What was your biggest challenge? And then Manuel, to respond, what have you seen across the system?
Yes, from the administrative perspective, you need to, first of all, I mean, it's not like you just want to implement an RPA. It's about, how it starts. If you're trying to streamline processes, then it starts with this, right? So, so the challenge is when you're looking into automation, you really need to identify the redundancies, for example, what makes your process cumbersome, and then to match the appropriate automation probably, or it could be like a new application. But in our case, we needed to map this need and requirement with this particular travel on behalf to the RPA. So basically, it's the identification of what actually needs to be streamlined and the identification of the technology that meets this. So this was a bit challenging for us in determining, and also to build a business case, a convincing one, probably. But if you know exactly what you're doing, I mean, this becomes like a detail. So that's pretty much I would say the challenge on our side.
Yeah, and I couldn't say it better myself. I think the requirements part is often neglected because automating a solution is actually quite fast, as we've already seen. But then all the pre-work to get us there in terms of aligning the process, creating awareness with the business, also getting technical accesses sometimes seems such an easy thing to do, but it's very often a blocker to get moving. So all of those components of, let's say, project preparation, typically it's the bottleneck in order to get faster.
Thank you so much. So as often, it's not the technology that takes longest, but the getting to the technology stage. I have a bunch of questions related specifically to Esquire. And if you allow me, I'd like to continue maybe for 2-3 more minutes to get through some of them, related to security concerns with the robots. So they're saying, who is actually reviewing and the trip requests? If it's all been done by the robot, who is checking that there's no misuse of funding? And related to that, a question on security the other way around, password sharing, going behind firewalls, etc. So any reflections on that would be much appreciated.
Hi, okay. So basically, who's checking? It's our ERP system, Umoja, it goes through workflow. So the bot is only doing the manual steps. So the checking is done by the certifying officer, for Adam 2. Again, that's why we opted for the attended bot. So to have the staff to reply exactly to this question we had in mind. We could have went for the unattended, no, because you would have to create a user ID, map it, etc. So we went for the accountability and also to address the staff concern, because when you hear robotics, staff are worried. No, we used the reverse psychology on this one, actually to comfort the staff and give them more empowerment to do something more high level, and this is only a manual step. You will continue to do it, but with lesser time on a different workstation, using your own credentials, so you are accountable at the end of the day. Adam 2, the certifying officer launching the bot, is accountable. They are doing all the verification, and then they are running the bot. And the third bot not yet launched, the same also.
Thank you very much. And I usually like to end on practical and philosophical notes. So 2 more questions, one from Juan, who's wondering, is there an officially approved automation tools that we can use in the UN? Maybe a question for you, Manuel?
I wouldn't know if they are like approved on a broader scale. I do know that the ones that we work with, they had to go through a lot of security checks, right? So there was also a cumbersome process of selecting the vendors to partner with, to also now avoid that if an organization has to start, they don't start from scratch, right? So now they can benefit from all of the pre-work that we already did there. But I wouldn't be able to say if they are kind of let's say accepted on a wider scale.
That makes perfect sense. So Juan, maybe best to reach out to Manuel to connect bilaterally on that. And then finally, leaving the philosophical ending to Mark from UNV. And he's wondering, in your opinion, in the future, are we more likely to see more RPAs or designing new systems with automation embedded at the onset? So looking ahead, what do you expect?
Well, I have a point of view. So I think it will be both, right? So I would say that low code of building systems from scratch is also a big topic in our field that is also growing a lot. So for sure there will be a lot of stuff coming in that direction. That said, there's always like tiny gaps within processes that don't warrant just more features in the applications, right? And so in those gaps, I still see a good kind of, let's say, case to pair RPA with low-code application development. In an ideal world, we would not need RPA. That's my point of view.
So a very elegant bit of both, it depends answer to that question. Thank you, Manuel. I have more questions for you, but we're already over time and I want to be mindful of your time and everyone who's joined us. So I'm going to say thank you for inspiring us with your work. Really exciting to see. I think there's so much potential for RPAs in the UN system, and I hope we're inspired in new initiatives in that space. So thank you so much. We're going to make your contact details, the slides, and a recording of the webinar available in case colleagues want to follow up with you directly. There were a lot of detailed questions that we could unfortunately not get to. Hopefully we can solve them later. So with that, a big thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who joined us. Thanks to Ursula, my co-host and conspirator in this series. And wishing you all a good day. See you for the next TechLearn talk.